SBTL वेबकास्ट में आपका स्वागत है।
Metaphors and similes. In Sanskrit language, we call them as RUPAK or DRISHTANT. Science is a way that needs reasoning. The core part, the heart of science is reasoning. But sometimes this reasoning comes in the form of analogy, similes, similar examples available all around us. For example, DNA is like a book. It is like a magazine that has a readable part and junk part as well. The magazine called DNA has readable articles and junk advertisements, promotional material. We literally use the word translation when genetic code is used by ribosomes to make new proteins. This process constructs an array of a sequence of many amino acids, linking them by peptide bond and transforming them into amino acid residues. This takes shape further and it makes the proteins in the cells. Now, if you look at genetic code, it is a kind of sentence that is constructed with words of just 3 letters, what we call as codons. Now, these codons, which are 3-letter words, they are made up of just 4 alphabets. See how metaphors from linguistics they use to understand the genetics as well. Metaphors are a powerful way of reasoning by analogy. But sometimes limited visualization could put metaphors and similes into contradiction. The best example is cell, a misnomer, not properly understood at the time when Robert Hooke observed them as empty spaces. In his book, Micrographia, he named such spaces, those could be seen under the compound microscope, as spaces, cells. But this was a metaphor that proved to be wrong afterwards. Today, in a span of just 350 years, we know that cells are metaphorically like cities and not empty spaces. A city that has roads made from microtubules. Just imagine the proteins called tubulin, alpha tubulin and beta tubulin, which are scattered in the cytoplasm. Now see, there is constructed a long road that is tubular called microtubule. They assemble from the minus end known as centriole to the various different directions inside the blob, what we call it cell. These microtubules, they are like roads, and the proteins like kinesin, they are like the cargo vehicles. They carry the packaged material from one place to another place, just similar to the logistics of today's Internet of Things. There are various different packaging centers and the goods are distributed all over. So these cargo vehicles, they are like the kinesins, those travel binding with a vesicle and carrying that to a new place inside the cell. This is how the metaphors work in biology. Microtubules, they do not simply make a supportive framework, but they are also important tracks in the cells on which the intracellular transport of various substances takes place in specific directions. The chemical changes in the form of metabolic activity occur at the scale of many thousands of a second. Just imagine the dynamics of this. An enzyme that catalyzes a reaction, a biological reaction, a biochemical reaction inside the cell. And today, we can map out the time, the fraction of the time, the millionth or thousandth fraction of time where these reactions take place inside the cell. The metaphors, they take us to the deep understanding of any subject. Scientific metaphors like lock and key mechanism, those define this process, are occurring at the scale of almost few thousandth fraction of a second. Lock and key defines the complementarity of a substrate and an enzyme molecule or various different interactions, those take place at molecular scale. In taxonomy, the key part, the core part is metaphors. The nomenclature of biological species that requires a fundamental understanding of the words by which it is going to be named as. In binomial nomenclature, we find metaphors and similes to a great extent. For example, Ashwatha or people. It is a metaphor in Indian faith that it is an incarnation of Lord Krishna. Metaphor means something that puts an analogy. Even Carolus Linnaeus named this peepal tree as Ficus religiosa. There is a religious base to this understanding. Maybe in Hinduism or Buddhism, you will see that peepal tree is an important tree that has religious importance. Buddha reached nirvana. He understood his own eternal nature sitting below this peepal tree. And that is the reason the word ficus religiosa comes for people. So look at this. Any subject is rich with, any scientific idea is rich with similes and metaphors. Now look at this. Any scientific idea is rich with metaphors and similes. That is a great way to understand anything by putting an analogy. However, the misnomers are exceptions to that. Thank you for listening. This is Lakshmi Raman Oza from Samartha Biology Tutorials, Latur.